Hello, everybody. This is Nico from change.org. I am the membership lead here, and today I want to talk about our membership program. A little bit about me before we jump into this. I've been at Change for 5 years now, and my background in general is crossover between activism, social change, and everything that's online. So that's like one of my key motivation. I've worked a lot with hackers, for example, trying to bridge the gap between traditional activism and online activism. And here at Change, something that really passionates me is to try to build a digital, socially engaged, sustainable business model. Essentially, to try to find ways to sustain at scale social change online. So, a little bit about Change.org before we start. If you don't know us, our vision is to create a world where no one feels powerless and where change is part of everyday life. And our mission is to empower people everywhere. We are actually present in 20 countries now, and to empower those people to create the change they want to see. And how do we do that? Well, we do that first through petitions that are started by individuals. So our model, the way it works, is essentially centered around those individuals and the personal stories that they can tell. What that creates essentially is authenticity. And so you have individuals saying something that either affects them or really matters to them. And they say this on our platform, and that's kind of the tech part of it, which amplifies their voice through the signatures from other people. Signatures that are eventually shared and recruit more signatures as well. So that's kind of the virality part of it. That creates a lot of people. You can think of a petition as a essentially online protest, and that leads to mass mobilization that in return will impact decision makers. And so that's kind of the way the whole platform works. You have stories being amplified, creating a movement, and therefore creating accountability for decision makers. And you have like a picture here as an example. Those are two girls, Maya and Eve, who are Canadian. And you can see them here with the CEO of Starbucks because they petitioned Starbucks to essentially start using recyclable cups, which they will do. They committed to this a few months ago. And those are like 11 or 10 years old, maybe when they started, girls who were essentially pressuring a powerful corporation to create change. And just recently, we learned that the UK would be the first country in the world to declare a nationwide climate emergency. And that was, again, a petition started by a young girl, actually slightly older than those two ones, but Ariana, who, was very passionate about social change and climate change and decided to start that petition. So those are just a couple of examples to show you how efficient, essentially, those petitions can be across the world. But so how do we sustain ourselves? That's essentially the topic for today. We made a shift 3 years ago. We used to have a model in which we would provide advertising for nonprofit organizations. That's actually what I did when I joined Change.org initially, was this to help nonprofit organizations to engage with people taking action on our platform. So what would we do would be that when people sign a petition, we would then show them another petition from a nonprofit organization. And if people accepted, they could opt into that organization, and this organization then could engage them, usually with fundraising asks. This worked quite well for a while, but it was not enough for us to sustain our growth and our ambition in different countries where we are operating. And so we decided to shift to a different model that was actually more aligned with our growth. And that's a user-generated model in which we have essentially two folds. One is a promoted product where people can essentially sign a petition and then afterward support that petition. I have to say, everything on the platform is free, but the way we fed ourselves is like to ask people to chip in, right? So that's the first thing. It's like you sign a petition and then afterwards you can chip in a little bit of money, and therefore this petition will be shared on our platform to more people. So you can think about it as a crowdfunding tool merged with what like Facebook offers for promotions, but as a way to give visibility to a cause that you care about. So that's the first thing that we have. We call it promoted. It's not exactly mentioned like that on the platform, but that's essentially what it does. It promotes that petition to more people. And the second thing that we have is a membership program that is here to help support the platform. So that's the difference between the promoted being when you support just one unique petition that you care about, and the membership program, which is when you support the entire platform. I put a few numbers there just to give a sense of the scale of Change.org. So we have about 50 million users per month on the platform. In total, we have a bit more than like 300 million users that are registered on the platform. And in terms of members, that's 110,000 members that we have for now. So talking about members, our value proposition is pretty simple and very similar to what a nonprofit organization would do, which is to support our mission. We're not a nonprofit organization. We are a public benefit corporation. So that means essentially those are not tax deductible contributions that people can make, but it's essentially this a similar type of offering where you say, well, if you care about social change, which is the main purpose of Change.org, then would you consider giving a little bit of money? So a couple of reasons why we decided to make that shift. One is that, well, as you probably know, membership or recurring donors or a sustainable revenue stream that is not traffic dependent. One thing sometimes that we struggle with that, with big spikes on petitions, then if our way of sustaining our work is dependent on like how much traffic we have, then our revenue will be also very spiky. And that means sometimes up, but also sometimes down, which is much less predictable. So for that reason, a program in which you can convince people to support the mission regularly is more efficient. The second thing is that this is more aligned with our people power approach, because essentially we just rely on people believing in our mission, and it's like that multitude of people that allows us to continue help petition starters. So it's been 2.5 years. We started by having, a very minimum viable product, as people say in that field. So that means, just the bare bone of what a program could be. And we haven't really changed anything. What we've done is like optimizing it for the past like 2.5 years. And we now have 110,000 members across North America and Europe. And I'm going to talk more about essentially how what we did to recruit those people. There's like kind of two general streams. One is on-site recruitment of members, and the second one is email recruitment. So the first one, I was talking about on-site recruitment. So think about it. When you're a Change.org user, what happens in general is that you sign a petition. Most of the traffic comes from social media. So Facebook is a very big stream of traffic for us. People share a petition on their Facebook page. Their friends can see it, click, and so they arrive to that petition page, they sign it, and then we will ask them if they want to share or promote that petition. If they want to promote, then they can enter the payment details. And just afterwards, when they click on promoting that petition, what we show them is this membership ask that you see on the screen. And that's how we can recruit member on site. That's not the only placement we have, but that's one of the most important one. And it is interesting because essentially that's a way for users to become members in just one click. Essentially, we have their payment details because they just promoted a petition. And so here we are essentially asking them if they would like to upsell, essentially, or kind of upgrade their promotion and convert it into a recurring ask. From a nonprofit perspective, I guess the same would be if you were to ask people for a one-time contribution, and at the moment they essentially send you that request for a one-time contribution, then you ask them if they want to become a recurring donor. So it's a quite interesting, I think, way of targeting here, because essentially you really not showing these type of ask to a lot of people. You narrowing it down to only to people who are actually making the first payment, and you do it probably at the right time and at the right place, because for them it's really easy, if they are convinced by this messaging, to become members. So that's really our first stream to recruit members, and something that we didn't have initially. Took us probably a year to get there, but it's become one of the most successful way for us to recruit members. A second learning that we've seen, and that's true for members and membership, but in general for any action on our platform, has been to use counters. So you can see examples here. On the right, you have one example from Russia. At the center, it's one that we use on that same page, which is to recruit members just after they have promoted one petition. You see on this one, keep fighting back. 115 more heroes are needed this month. And so there's this idea essentially of counters or counting of like numbers that are creating urgency. That is one thing that we've noticed always matters. If you go on Change.org, I didn't put a screenshot here, but all our petition pages also have counters, where essentially you see how many signatures are on the petition, and also how many more could be needed for this petition to make progress. And so that's something that we've noticed works really well. We obviously, test this often, and so our understanding of why this works is because essentially it creates something that's both urgent, so it shows essentially, that there's a timeline. Typically on the right, you see this with the countdown, or that there's something that's specific. And I think this is the other reason, like the second reason that makes it working really well, is that people like stuff that is tangible. And so this number that you have here, the 1,017 members, this is a real number. This is our calculation, and we were like, okay, well, by the end of the month, this is what we need if we want to hit our targets, what we have planned and what's required for us to continue our work. So let's just be transparent with that and tell people on the platform that this is what we need and make it an ask. By the way, this came from user research that we did, and people essentially telling us that they'd rather have like more clarity around what we need, and the more clarity we would give them, the more they would feel essentially better giving, because they would understand it better. So that's what we're trying to do here, and it's been working pretty well for those different steps, gathering more signatures, more promotions, and more members as well. Third learning is around social proofs. So you have a couple of examples here. Let's take the one on the right. So this is in French. For those who can't read French, I'm actually French. Didn't say this initially, but so 800 nouveaux soutiens ce mois-ci. This means that we just gathered 800 new members this month. And so you have the list of the people here. Those are real people who gave. And the idea here is essentially to say, well, if people start seeing like a movement, they will adhere more to what's happening. And so it's essentially this idea of like convincing people to do something because others are already convinced. And this, again, has been A/B tested. So we split our traffic on those different pages and tried essentially to see if this would work better than our page without those social proofs. And so we do this for both the promotion asks. So that's what you see on the left, like the left screenshot that I have here, where people are shown like other people who just recently promoted, and for membership ask on the right. We initially, and that's I think interesting, we didn't have all those additional faces that you see, like the 794 others. We only had like a few of them, but by adding more faces, this improved our results as well. So that's the third learning, social proofs, trying to essentially show that other people are doing it as a way to convince new ones to do so. Other stream for us to acquire people, acquire members, as I said, is email. So those other examples that you saw were on-site examples, right? So our second way to recruit more members is essentially to send them emails. We have, as I said, nearly 300 million users on the platform. Actually, I think a little bit more now. And so we are able to send them emails. We actually do send them quite a significant amount of email. Usually those emails are sign asks. So we ask them to sign a new petition that has appeared on the platform, or they receive updates on previous petitions that they have signed. So I guess one question that's that you can have is like, how many emails do you send, and how many of them are donation asks, or the way we say it is like membership asks. So there's kind of two approaches here. One is essentially to say that the more emails sent like that, the better, and another approach is like to say, well, the fewer, the better. We're more leaning on the first approach, essentially to say, well, for a certain portion of our user base, essentially what we've noticed is that simply the more we send membership asks to them, the higher the conversion that we get. And that has held since the beginning of the program. Maybe, for the past 2.5 years, some people may have received in total probably more than 50 membership asks. And the conversion that we see based on how many membership asks you received previously always increases. And so that's an indication that probably for the people we are targeting, continuing to ask and share information around our membership program is a good way to continue recruit them. That's why sometimes we say that an email that's not sent is a missed opportunity. However, there are different approaches, and if you take another big platform, like actually much bigger than our platform, Wikipedia actually has a different strategy. What they do is like they try to send less emails, and they kind of narrow down their asks on specific moments, typically by the end of the year. And at that moment, they have an increased pressure on email, but the rest of the year, it's much less. So that's on frequency. On framing, essentially, we do two things that do work equally, depends on the country, but usually we do either membership asks that are petition-based, and so we will use the example of a petition to then, share let people understand the work that we are doing, or we do general asks. And interestingly, those general asks do work pretty well, and in some countries, like in France or in Russia, where we operate as well, they do work better. And those asks is essentially telling people that we are an open platform, that we are free to use for all, and that we are independent because our money comes from people. And so by just telling those type of very, not basic, but I would say genuine ideas around our program, it helps people understand what we are doing and therefore recruit them as members. In terms of segmentation, the way we are doing it is essentially two things. One, we will send people more email the more they engage with it. That's how we are defining our segmentation. So we have 5 different categories of people, from the new ones who never received email before to the one that do engage a lot with the emails that they receive. And so we define those segments based on open rate of people and click-through rate of those people. And so based on this, we will send you more or less email. And so say you start engaging less with emails that we send you, then we will reduce the volume of emails that you receive. And the second thing that we do is we test. Essentially, this has been like a very interesting learning for us as we launched the program. Testing has been essential, and now for any membership ask that goes out, we split test, and so it's not one email that goes out, it's 2 emails that go out. And on top of like acquiring more members, what happens is that we are able to learn something. And so by comparing on one side the control version and on the other side, well, what we changed, we're able to learn what works best. So that's what you see here. That's one of our best learnings. We used to have emails. Those are like screenshots from our Spanish team. What you see here is essentially how the email looked like. And so you have the beginning, you put the name of the person you're sending the email to. And then you see above the big red button, what you have is something that's like highlighted in yellow. Something that says, por eso hoy voy a ser muy directo. Quería pedirte que si puedes nos ayudes a mantener nuestra independencia haciéndote socio de Change.org. This means essentially, it's very direct. I'm going to translate it so you know, but for this today, we're going to be very direct. We would like to ask you, if you could, to help us maintain our independence by becoming a member. And so this we tested against a version in which you didn't have the yellow highlight. And this version was improving significantly our conversion rate. I think for this one, we were in between of like 15 or 20% increase in terms of overall conversion, which was a pretty good result that we decided then to roll out to other spaces on site, typically on that on-site placement that you saw just before. So that's one of our key learning for the past year, which is like to put a yellow highlighting there. A second learning, which is actually maybe hard to read here on that screenshot, but is to use big fonts. So maybe actually a way to compare it is if you look at the beginning of this email, you see that's the normal size of the letters. But what we have here in the actual copy, which is, Hola Manuel, sabías que más, etc., this is in a bigger font. And we've increased this sometimes up to like 21 points on the size font. And every time we've done it, we stopped at 21, but every time we've done it, we realized that this increased again the conversion. We should actually maybe continue to increase it. But the reason that we believe this works is because essentially when people read on a smartphone, which is a lot, like for us, it's like 2/3 of the emails or read on a mobile phone. When you do that, it's easier. It's like just generally easier to read those emails with a bigger font. Email as well, we not only tested design, but we also tested framings. And so what you have here is like kind of a summary of what we realized by testing again works best. First, urgency. You remember counters that I talked about, having goals as well, having like the story of life-changing situations. So essentially building through the storytelling the urgency. The second is emotional. So making the email very personal, having a personal tone. All the emails are signed by the staff, and sometimes they tell their own story or their own relationship to a story to recruit members, sharing feelings and giving more ideas around the broader situation, like essentially storytelling tips, but from a personal perspective. So as if it were a friend who would be talking to you. So urgency, emotional, and tangibility. So always reminding people what's at stake and what their help could be bringing. And so being very specific, typically, as I said before, about how many members we need and what it would allow us to do if we had more members. And so we always think about those three things, urgency, emotion, and tangibility, as a checklist. And so for all the emails that we send, we essentially look at that and say, okay, well, is it urgent enough? Is it emotional enough? Is it tangible enough? As a way to force ourselves to respect those kind of guidelines that we have. One thing we do as well is to run like bi-weekly writing workshops. So we have people sending those emails across different countries. And so what we do is like we come together and we say, okay, what have we written this day? And so we read them out loud. And so we give people feedbacks and using those type of rules, urgency, emotional, tangible, and trying to make sure that we are, applying them properly. And I talk about A/B testing. We also A/B test our writings by having sometimes two people writing the same email. So using sometimes a different tone. And by splitting that send, we're able to see, well, if one version works better than the other one. So that's on email. More broadly, and to probably close a little bit that rapid overview of our program, there's like 5 main investment areas for us over the past 3 years. So in order to increase our amount of members and to grow our membership program, the main thing that was essential for us was traffic and audience, essentially. So making sure that we were able to drive more and more people to see petitions, to realize the impact those petitions were having, and therefore to ask them to become members. That's not something I focused a lot on, but it's kind of the foundation of the entire program. The second thing that we did is like we hired people. So in every market where we operate in those 20 countries I mentioned, we have a membership manager who's someone who will write those emails, who will be in touch with the members. And one thing that's interesting is we hired a lot of people who were not fundraising specialists or not even digital marketers, but people who were smart and very close to our mission, sometimes coming from different functions. So they were people who were helping petition starters before, but we're interested into moving in that different area. And so we trained them and they became our membership managers. So I'm very proud to be leading this team. I mentioned testing. Testing actually more words than design. A lot of our iteration, I shared here some design learnings, but a lot of our iteration is actually on the copy. And that's where the urgency, the emotion, and the tangible aspect came from. We also met a lot of users and members. We still do. We have a goal for every membership manager to meet at least 2 people or to get in touch with 2 people, 2 members every month, so that we can keep on getting feedbacks, quotes, and we run on top of that some user research to essentially keep on improving our program based, based on what people are telling us. And the last thing we do is we talk to nonprofit organizations, we talk to media, we talk to platforms like Wikipedia, and we try to learn from them. There's so much all the time that we have those discussions that we can learn, that those conversations are essential to our growth. However, we've also failed, and so therefore we've learned. There's a few things that I put there that were quite critical. And so the first thing is that initially when we launched our program, we were very enthusiastic about it. And so we did ask a lot of people, probably too soon and too many people. So that means we had this approach where we didn't have a proper targeting. And so we were essentially emailing a lot of people. And that just didn't work. Emailing a lot of people or showing a lot of people membership asks on site. So not using that targeting that we have now, which is if you promote, then we ask you to become a member. We would just like straight ask you to become a member for anyone who would sign the petition. And that just didn't work at all. The second thing is, initially we were not certain that our value proposition, essentially helping sustain our platform, was good enough. It's like we had doubts about it. Probably we were also a bit too shy to just directly ask people for money. And so we tried to test different value propositions, and that just didn't work either. We realized that it was very complex and that eventually focusing on that one simple value proposition supporting the platform was much better. And the last thing I would say is like that's still like a question we have, but we had a lot of debate around how much centralized should our program be versus decentralized. And so currently our approach is to have a unique value proposition across the world, but we do not write the same email in a given country. This is completely decentralized, and what we share our learnings across those different countries, but we do not have an entirely centralized program. And so we have a lot to learn. Those, I hope, are initial signs of success for us, but it's a very young program. So that means typically we don't have a real retention strategy yet for those 110,000 members. And our branding, is not very streamlined because of that decentralization that we have. And so I do hope that, you learned a little bit during that presentation. And I do know as well that I have a lot to learn from other organizations, typically non-profit organizations, who have been, running similar type of programs for much longer. And essentially, I hope we can connect, and I hope I can learn from you as well. Thank you very much.